Boomba, boomba, boomba. I wrote my final essay about a guy named Ryan, last name Higa, aka Niga Higa. The only reason I am filming this video is because I have like 12 videos to edit and I don't really want to edit them right now. What's up guys, it's your boy Yankee Sam 11, and in case you haven't noticed, I am wearing my UCLA shirt right now, which means one of two things. Either UCLA sponsoring this video, or we're talking about UCLA today. Well, I have very high standards on the people I work with, and UCLA is a trash school, so they're not the sponsor of today's video, but we are talking about UCLA. Anyways, I watch a lot of YouTube, and the thing that's been popping up on my recommended right now are a bunch of people explaining their college degrees. Now, most of these guys happen to be CS majors, and the reason I think they do really well is because there are a lot of nerds on YouTube that really work hard in their everyday lives, and then they see these videos of influencers who were previously CS majors, and they're like, holy crap, these people are CS majors and they're cool. Maybe I can do that too. Wrong! If you're not born cool, you will never be cool. Which is why I'm here to tell you about the much more cool CS major, communication studies. Because that's what I studied at UCLA. Let me show you what I mean. Let's hope they still have my grades here. Oh my gosh, I don't remember my password. UCLA is a quarter system. There are 4 semesters basically. Fall, winter, spring, and then summer. Except summer's not mandatory, right? So instead of a semester system, which is like 16 weeks I think, every quarter is 10 weeks and then a finals week. Everything's really fast, you don't go in depth, but you have to learn it really quickly. That being said, my first quarter at UCLA was super easy. I took this oral communication class, and I did not know this at the time, but this is one of the easiest classes at UCLA. Like, if you're scared of public speaking, it might be a terrible class for you. But literally, all you have to do is write 4 different speeches and then give the speech to class. And that's the entire class. And you know it's easy when half of the class is full of student athletes. But the second class I took, it's called Intro to Communication Studies. This is probably the hardest class in the communication major. And why is it so hard? It's because it's the weeder class. A weeder class is just the class that they use to weed out the people who aren't really good at that major. And this is the communication weeder class at UCLA. One unique thing about UCLA's communication major is the fact that you can't come into UCLA as a communication major. The earliest you can declare a communication major is your sophomore year. And the reason for that is because you have to apply to get in. And the acceptance rate is really low. Now, you're going to hear versions of this a lot in the next couple minutes, but UCLA's communication major is not all that good. So you're probably wondering then, why is it such an exclusive major then? Why do they have an application process? The reason for that, UCLA is a public school. UCLA simply does not have the funds to employ the professors they need to make this major accessible for all students that were interested in this major. Now, this weeder class, I think if I remember correctly, only 5 to 10% of the students actually get A's or A minuses.
I always tell the truth.
But to be honest, it's not because the information is hard to understand, but it's simply because there's so much information and you basically have to memorize it word for word. This class was so intense that you were allowed either 10 or 20 pages of notes for the midterm and final. And the rumor is that when the communication department looks at applicants, this is basically the only class they look at. The rest of your GPA doesn't really matter. Anyways, fun little story about this class. This was one of my first classes at UCLA, and the first day, I don't know anyone, right? Because I'm a freshman. I'm scared, and then I see my friend from orientation that I met, and she's like, hey, come sit with me and my friend. And I'm like, oh yeah, for sure. I sit down, her friend's sitting next to her, and he's like, what do you do for fun? And I'm like, oh, I'm trying to be a YouTuber. And back then, I had like 300 subscribers, right? I asked this man, hey, what do you do for fun? And he's like, oh, I make music. In my head, I'm thinking, probably got like a SoundCloud with like 20 followers max. Me, I got like 300 subscribers, bro. Now, while I'm thinking these thoughts, I'm realizing, oh shoot, I kind of forgot his name. And so I just blatantly ask him, like, hey man, like I forgot your name. What was it again? He's like, my name's Conan. I'm like, oh, that's a cool name. I find out a couple months later, this guy's full name is Conan Gray.
Red lights! Stop signs! I still see your face!
Second quarter of my freshman year, I took 2 more prerequisites for the comm major. One was linguistics. Language is a science. You might not believe it, but it is a science. Because if you think about the word doghouse, at the end of the day, it's a house, right? And dog is the adjective describing the house. It's a house for dogs. Any other compound word you can think of in English follows that rule. The second word in the compound word describes what type of thing that word is. Anthill is a hill for ants. Isn't that cool, guys? Language is a science too. So who says communication studies isn't a real science? It's the harder CS, guys. I took an intro to Soc class. That's another prereq for comm. This was in my top 3 classes at UCLA. The one thing that I remember our professor teaching us is if you look at a rainbow, you have Roy G. Biv. And those are all separate colors. But where does red become orange? And where does orange become yellow? Stepping aside from the color example, what about just like the type of person you are? What makes me American? Is it just my citizenship? Is it just my passport? Or is it something fundamental to do with the culture of America? Fascinating questions, guys. And you already know your boy got straight A's, so we still got a 4.0 heading into the last quarter of freshman year. And I just realized I didn't take a single comm class because I finished all my prereqs the quarter before. So instead of going into these classes, I'll give you a 1-sentence summary of all of them. English Comp 5W, all we did was read Othello. History 10B, online history class, easiest class I've ever taken at UCLA. Phi Sci 5, top 5 class at UCLA that I took, taught me that what you put into your body is more important than the actual exercise you do. Econ 11, microeconomic theory, my first A- at UCLA. And the reason I took it was because I also double majored in econ. So if you want me to do the same exact video for my econ major, let me know and I'll do it. Moving on to sophomore year. At this point, I finally got into the major, so I was able to take upper div classes. But what you have to recognize is when you're a sophomore at a public school, you have terrible enrollment times, which means there are very few classes available for you. So the only comm class that fit with my schedule that I got into was Comm 160. This was one of my favorite communication classes I've ever taken at UCLA. It's not really about how politicians talk or why Donald Trump says build a wall, build a wall, build a wall. Build that wall. It's actually more about why the media is set up the way it is today. One of the coolest things I learned in this class is the rationale for why media outlets are so polarizing nowadays. What I mean by that is there are a bunch of outlets on the far right and there's a bunch of outlets on the far left, and there are very few moderates. And the reason for that, this was one of the biggest things I learned throughout my communication major in like every class. It's because of the money. Most of the reasons why the world is set up the way it is currently is because it is profitable. If you look at television nowadays, there are infinite amount of channels. And so if you watch television, in theory, you're gonna pick the thing that is most interesting to you. If I'm a hardcore baseball fan, I'm going to put on the baseball game and not watch anything else. Because as someone who watches television, I can't be watching 2 things at the same time. So, there are very, very, very few people in life who are very passionate about moderate news coverage. A lot of us want it, but very few people are going to watch that over the next Avengers movie. But these radical outlets, the people watching those shows are radicals, right? This is their deepest passion. And so they're always going to tune into those things. And because nowadays there's so many channels and you're just fighting for a sliver of the audience, when you get consistent viewership from a sliver of an audience, you're making tons of money, which is why political outlets are the way they are right now. Anyways, the other cool thing we did in this class was we made political ads. And you already know your boy Yankee Sam 11 had to go off on the video editing on these.
I never thought that would be so simple.
Call me a liar? I ain't calling you a truther.
It's going to take some time.
Winter quarter sophomore year, I took Comm 156, social networking. Complete pyramid scheme, guys. It is not about Facebook. It is not about Twitter. It is not about any social network you can think of right now. It's about networks of people. Things like 6 degrees of separation. If you don't know what that means, it basically means how, in theory, we are no more than 6 people away from any other person on this earth. I'll show you a simple example real quick. Kevin Bacon, random actor, don't remember the last time he was relevant, right? Let's take a more relevant actor right now. Tom Holland. Tom Holland is 2 people away from Kevin Bacon. Kevin Bacon was in X-Men First Class with Bill Milner, and Bill Milner was in Loki with Tom Holland. Crazy, right? Final quarter of sophomore year. I took a psych class that counted towards my comm major. Psych 137C, intimate relationships. This class was basically just about romantic relationships. What makes you attractive, what makes you unattractive, and I just took it because I had a crush on a girl and I was a simp. It didn't work, guys. Cool thing about this class though is you ultimately realize that people like people for reasons that no one can understand. You might think you like someone because they're very similar to you. Someone else might like someone because they're very different from you. There's no 5 steps to finding love. There's no dummy's guide to get a girlfriend. Anyways, by the end of my sophomore year, I think I still have a 4.0 in my major. Pretty smart guy, eh? Fall quarter junior year though, I took Communication 150. This is a mandatory class for all comm majors at UCLA, and it's so boring. The one thing you should know about communication majors at UCLA, they're not the best at math. My first week of this class, I kid you not, we spent over an hour discussing mean, median, and mode. It's really not that hard of a class, but I forgot to do a couple homework assignments, so there's my first A-. By the way, I feel like some of you guys are wondering at this point, like, did you just take one class a quarter? Again, I was a double major, so most of my classes were about my econ degree. Get this video to like 50 likes and I'll talk about it. But yeah, it's not like I was just taking one class a quarter, guys. Oh, and winter quarter junior year, I actually took 2 communication classes. One was Comm 100, and this was another mandatory class for all comm majors at UCLA. It's basically like Comm 10 with another 0 on it. We basically learned the same things over and over again. But the second class I took was called Comm 111, Conflict and Communication. What this is about why people get angry when they communicate with each other, which in theory is kind of cool, right? The stuff you learn from this class can help you become less mad with people when you communicate with them. But the problem is, when you know what the right thing to do is, you recognize when people aren't doing that right thing. If you bring that up to someone while they're mad at you, that makes them more mad 99% of the time. So the frustrating part about this class is that you learn what is right and you learn how to do things better, but you have a hard time sharing that with people. This is like some Matrix-ish, like blue pill or red pill. I forget which one's which, but would you rather be happy and ignorant, or would you rather be very messed up and angry but woke? I chose the angry and woke path. Last quarter of junior year, I took 2 more comm classes, Comm 143, Rhetoric of Pop Culture, and Comm 155, AI and Media. Rhetoric of Pop Culture sounds like a really cool class, right? But the thing is, it's not really about pop culture. Most of UCLA's communication classes are very theoretical, and there's very little practice of what you're learning, which is why I think the major sucks. If you go to USC, their comm school is a literal newsroom. It's dumb lit. What they're learning in class is put into practice, and that's like kind of the hope of college, right? UCLA, all you're doing is just learning things that you can't really seem to find a practice for. And so this class was a lot of theory about, to be honest, I don't really remember. But I do remember my final essay. I wrote my final essay about a guy named Ryan, last name Higa, aka Niga Higa. Niga Higa put this video up back when he was still a YouTuber about COVID. But what I wrote about is the form he used to tell the story, the satire, for example, and how that communicates his message more effectively, which is kind of cool if you're a nerd like me who loves Niga Higa. And maybe someday Niga Higa would grow to love me. Comm 155 though, kind of like Comm 150, it was another one of those more technical classes. A lot of it was just about data and how can we get better data. If AI has bad data, it can never be accurate. And that's pretty intuitive, right? Like if AI is based solely off of data, if you have bad data, the AI is never going to work. But the bigger question is, what is good data and what is bad data? This video is sponsored by Yankee Sam 11. Please consider subscribing. It's free and you can unsubscribe at any time. Leave a like, it helps the algorithm. And comment down below what you studied in college. Back to your featured programming. Moving on to my last comm class at UCLA. My senior year, I only took 1 quarter at UCLA because I finished things up real quick. And the last class was Comm M147. A lot of it was about how economics and money play into media markets and different forms of media. If you look at YouTubers, for example, the top YouTubers make a whole bunch of money. That's why when you look at YouTube, there are so many people like me making YouTube videos. If you look at my last couple of videos, they don't have that many views, right? But why do I keep making them? 2 reasons. Because I like it. I love doing this. Secondly, the chance at becoming a superstar, even though it's super low, it's kind of appealing to me. And economically, if you look at YouTube, it has a very low fixed cost. The amount of money you need to invest to get started on making your YouTube channel is very low. If you really wanted to, take out your phone camera, go film a video, put it up on YouTube. Use Starbucks Wi-Fi, you don't even have to pay for your own Wi-Fi. And because the fixed cost is so low, a lot of people can enter the industry. Now put all that together and what do you get? You get a really appealing profession, and the profession is easy to get into. You get a surplus of artists on YouTube. And what's the result of that? A bunch of broke YouTubers, like me. YouTube pays us off views on ad revenue, but the thing is, we get cents on the dollar of what YouTube gets. That being said, if there was less competition in the industry, if it was harder to get into, or if it was a much less appealing job, creators in this industry would be paid way more. It's simple supply and demand, guys. Now that being said, that's my entire communication major at UCLA, and I think I only got 1 A-. My biggest complaint about UCLA comm classes is that they're not very practical. You learn a whole bunch of theory, which is really fun sometimes, but you never get the chance to actually try to do something with it. I hope if you're watching this and maybe you're a CS guy, an engineering guy, I hope you've learned to appreciate something like this after watching this video, because I think comm is really fun. Love you filthy animals. It's Christmas Eve right now, so I'm gonna go celebrate.